Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Sandra and I will be your host for today's webinar. And today we have a special guest who will share how to make effective cold calls, how to combine them with cold emails, and how to handle the most common sales objections your prospects might have. A while ago we released Woodpecker.co, which is a mobile app that helps you to make and track sales calls. So I wanted to shed more light on how to properly conduct a cold call. And that's why I invited Jason Bay to come and talk to us and share his knowledge on the topic. Hi, Jason. It's great to have you here.
I'm super excited to be here. I would love to. Let me share my screen real quick. What we could do, Sandra, just to break the ice a little bit, is I'd love to hear from you guys in the chat. What was your favorite childhood breakfast? We got a couple minutes here before we get started. Could you drop into the chat here in Zoom? What was your favorite childhood breakfast? What was it for you, Sandra? What did you eat as a kid?
Oh, my favorite breakfast. There was lots of lots of favorite breakfasts. Yeah. I'm not sure if I can pick just one. What was it for you?
I ate. I was born in America, so we eat a lot of shitty food in America. I ate Pop Tarts.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Pop Tarts in the chat too. Croissants, bread with sugar, chocolate chip pancakes, Nick says, cream of wheat. You guys see all this in the chat? We've got a lot of Pop Tarts fans too. Grits. I ate a lot of Egos too, Evan. Yeah, keep it coming, you guys. We'll start here in maybe a minute or two. Let us know what your favorite childhood breakfast was. So, what do people eat for breakfast in Poland typically?
Oh, I think sandwiches, cereal. Yeah, mostly.
There we go. Yeah, we have. You could tell a lot about where people are from by the type of breakfast that they eat usually. Adam says vodka for breakfast. Well, I don't know what time it is for you, Adam. Hopefully, you're not doing that before sales calls. Or I don't know. Maybe it helps you loosen up a little bit. Connor says, okay, it's 5 p.m. for you, Adam. That's, yeah, totally acceptable, man. Cameron's a big Hotel Waffle fan. I don't know, Yuri. I don't know why your favorite foods are always sugar and fat. That's just kind of how it works, I guess. That's what we crave. Mark says, must be Russian. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. So, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a bunch of different things today, but we're going to center the conversation today around cold calling and some of the stuff that fits around it. Before we dig into that, I thought what would be good to set this up is I'd love to hear from you. Who do you feel like when you're doing outbound, who do you feel like is your biggest competitor? So feel free to give us in the chat who you think your biggest competitor is. Adam says time, Mark says yourself, Ashley says Cision, status quo, Peter says my mind, myself, league. Yeah, so we have people listing out competitors, Sandra, which is kind of interesting, and then people listing out themselves. Noel says my internal dialogue, status quo I'm seeing. Yeah, prospect doing nothing. So you may have been asked this question before, and a lot of times what people like me, sales trainers, coaches, consultants, they'll say is status quo. And that's not necessarily a wrong answer, but your real competition is actually this. It's all of the other people trying to get your prospect's attention, even people that you don't directly compete with. This is a screenshot of my email inbox. My wife Sarah used to work, we used to work together in our business, so her emails are now forwarded over to me. That's why you see her name. But your competition is not your direct competitor. It's not status quo. It's actually all of the other people vying for your prospect's attention in their email inbox, their LinkedIn messages. Anyone here getting LinkedIn DMs? I mean, Sandra, do you get messages and LinkedIn emails, people trying to set up sales calls with you? Does that happen to you?
Yeah, sure.
A little bit. And we're talking about the phone today. That's my voicemail inbox. Yeah, Jeremy says daily. Maggie says all the time. Recruiters. Matthias says. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So your competition, again, we have to figure out how to stick out and grab the attention of our prospects because we're competing with everyone else that's trying to get in their LinkedIn inbox, in their voicemail, their phone, their email inbox. We got to find a way to stick out from everything. So for those of you that are unaware, because we got a group, international group today, this is Times Square. So this is a better visual of what it looks like to vie for your prospect's attention. If we don't find a way to stick out, we're going to be one of these random billboards here. And I don't know about you, nothing in this picture really stands out to me. It's all kind of just a big blur. And what we want to do is we want to think about how could we create a personalized ad campaign for our prospects. And I used a little tool, I don't even know what it's called. I just found it on the internet to put my face up on an ad. Hey, Jordan. So imagine what it would be like if you were able to put your prospect's face or company name onto a billboard. That'd be pretty badass, right? So what I want you to think about is how can we treat our outreach like a personalized ad campaign? And we're going to talk about how this fits into a sequence here in a second. But I want you to think about our biggest competition is everyone vying for our prospects' attention in their email inbox, calling their phone, and trying to get into their LinkedIn DMs. What we want to do to create some differentiation from all of this over here is we want to treat what we're doing like a personalized ad campaign so it pops. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is three things. We're going to talk about a framework for sequencing. I call it KISS, Keep It Simple Sequencing. So this is going to be how does phone fit in with email and social. We're going to talk about a cold calling framework. And then we're also going to talk about how to deflate some of your toughest objections. So before we get into this, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Before we dig in, where are you personally having the biggest challenges with your cold calls? So let me know right now, is it, an example of this might be I have call reluctance. Maybe I'm afraid to pick up the phone. That's totally okay if that's the case. Yeah, no time, no answers, getting to the decision maker. Maybe it's specific objections that you get. Maybe it's not knowing how to introduce yourself. Maybe it's not knowing what questions to ask. Yeah, so these are good. So I'm seeing a lot of not interesteds, getting answers, but feeling like you're spray and praying, decision makers. Yeah, anxiety, Kevin says. What's up, Kevin? Yeah, I'm on a way to a meeting. So it looks like we're getting objections. Holly says reluctance, afraid of calling unknown people, winning attention. Yeah, if you've relied heavily on email or LinkedIn messages and haven't done a lot of cold calling, it can be kind of scary for sure. Yeah, getting the meeting on the first call, Matthias says. Blair, I want people to call me back. I hate to break it to you, Blair. That's tough. We're not going to talk about how to get people to call you back, but we're going to talk about how you can use voicemail to do something else. I'm going to save it. So Blair, we'll get to that. Yeah, landline structure, getting to decision makers, calling people on their cell phone, pressure to call mobile numbers, Sarah says. Okay, cool. We're going to dig into all of those things. So first, what I want to share with you, let's dig into that sequencing framework. So we're going to start with the where the phone fits in. All right, so let me share my other little screen here. And we're going to dig into a sequencing framework. So as you guys have questions, because we have 260 people on right now, it looks like, if you could use the Q&A function in Zoom. So on the screen in the bottom, there's a Q&A button. Sandra's going to help me with the questions. Put your questions into the Q&A so that I don't lose it because there's a bunch of people on the call. So let's talk about the sequencing framework. Okay, so I want to talk to you about where phone, email, and LinkedIn, how you can get all of these to work together. So if we look at a typical sequence, the reason why I call it keep it simple sequencing is that people really tend to overthink this part of it. There's no magic recipe to getting in touch with your prospects, but I want to give you some fundamentals, okay? There's a couple fundamental things that you want to do here. All right, so the first thing is it needs to be multi-touch, and it needs to be multi-channel. All right, so multi-touch is 12 to 15 touches over 3 weeks. That's the sweet spot between phone plus email plus social. You might be seeing that and thinking, holy shit, Jason, that's a lot of touches, man. I'm going to use a little bit of profanity today, you guys, also. So let me know if it offends you. I'm happy to tame it down a little bit. But you might be thinking, dang, that's a lot of touches, right? And we're going to talk about how to weave in some really simple email and voicemail touches as well. But regardless of what you do with your sequence and your outreach, it needs to be 12 to 15 touches. It needs to be multi-channel, all right? So it needs to at least be phone plus email and preferably, LinkedIn. And we're going to do this over 3 weeks. So that's fundamental number one, okay? The second thing that we want to keep in consideration here, and I'm going to show you how the sequence plays out here in a second. There's a couple different techniques that we want to use at play here as well, okay? So one of them is what I call a triple touch. If anyone's read a book called Combo Prospecting, Tony Hughes talks about this. But triple touches are doing a series of activities in tandem at the same time. And I'll talk and show you what that looks like here in a second. So triple touches. So anytime we email someone, we're going to call them. Anytime we do something on LinkedIn, we're going to tie that together with an email. And preferably, we're doing all three of those things at the same time to create some of that noise to get their attention. All right. And then the other thing that we're going to leverage is short follow-ups. So let's look at what this might look like. So this sequence that I'm going to outline for you, this is an example of what you would do with a tier 1 or A priority prospect. So this is that VP of whatever or that C level that you really want to get a meeting with. The most ideal person that you could get a first meeting with, this is what you're going to do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to follow this pattern for 3 weeks in a row. So this is day 1. And then this is day 3. So let's say that you started this sequence. So for me today, it's Tuesday. I think for most people on this call, it's probably Tuesday, unless you're in Australia, maybe it might be really late. So Tuesday, day 3 will be Thursday. So what you're going to do today, if you started this sequence, and let me zoom in here, is you're going to do these 3 things at the same time. So you're going to do phone, you're going to do email, and then you're going to do LinkedIn. So there's a couple little things that you want to do here is you want to point the voicemail to the email. So if you call someone and you get a voicemail, at the end of the voicemail, what I want you to do is I want you to say, and hey, David, no need to call me back. I just sent you an email and the subject line is cold calling. So you're going to call out the subject line and you're going to point that voicemail. We're going to show that the prospect, that the person calling them is the same person that's emailing them. So I want you to think about the prospect that you're reaching out to here for a second. The people you're reaching out to likely get dozens or even hundreds, depending on what kind of company they look at, of cold outreaches per week. They're not going to know that this random person that called them on Tuesday is the same person that emailed them on Thursday. We want to show them that those two things are connected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say at the end of my voicemail, and hey, Adam, no need to call me back. I just sent you an email and the subject line is voicemail from Jason Bay. That's another little subject line that you can use. I'll throw this into the chat. That's one that we see working well. You could also say something like this. I just dropped 2 in the chat. Those are 2 subject line variations that you can do after you call someone. The order of this is actually not that important. You could email and then call. So you could email the person first and then call and say, I just sent you an email 2 minutes ago, or I sent you an email 15 minutes ago and the subject line is XYZ. Those two subject lines, in the chat are different variations that you can use. All right. So there's a couple other things that you can do here with LinkedIn. So I don't actually recommend in the first week sending the person a connection request on LinkedIn. What you can do instead is you can follow their profile. I just want to create a notification. I can follow them because it's not going to, they don't have a choice over letting me follow them or not. So I could follow them. That's going to create a notification. If they post on LinkedIn, I could like or comment on something that they posted. And I could also tag in content. So one thing I saw Jordan Flippies on this call, one thing that Jordan does that works pretty good is she'll reshare something her company posted. She'll add a little commentary and then she'll tag a few prospects in it and say, hey, so-and-so, I thought you'd find this helpful. So I can phone, email, and then LinkedIn. I want to do all of those things at the same time. Again, I want this to create a bunch of notifications for the person and show them that these three things are connected. So that's what day one looks like. So day 3 is going to look something like this. It's going to be very similar. I'm going to do phone again. And you guys, if you're thinking, well, what do I say over the phone? That's the very next thing that we're going to cover is the cold calling framework. I just want to give you a perspective of how this fits in. So we have phone and then email. So one of the things that you can do here with the phone call is make it trigger based. So one of the things, for example, let's say you're using Woodpecker to send your emails out. You could say, hey, I'm going to use the app to call people that opened up the emails that I sent them. So I'll look and see who's opening up my emails, and I'll use that as a trigger to call those people. So that's one little hack that I highly, highly recommend is focusing your cold calling time on people that are opening up and engaging with your emails or responding to what you're saying on LinkedIn. All right. So you got trigger-based phone call there. And then for your email, all you're going to do is you're going to bump the previous email with any thoughts. That's it. That's all you're going to do. So if we zoom out here, day 1, what we're going to do here is phone, email, LinkedIn all at once. If I get the voicemail, I'm going to point the voicemail to the email and I'm going to say, I sent you an email, excuse me, and the subject line is XYZ. And then I can hit them up on LinkedIn. And then day 3, so I'm going to wait 2 days later, I'm going to call them again. And then I'm going to send them an email. And the email is just going to say, any thoughts? Okay. I'm going to show you guys one other little technique that works pretty good. All right. Okay. So here's something that you can do too. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So this is a pretty cool little technique. So let's say this was the first email that I sent to a prospect. This is the invite email for this webinar, obviously. So let's say that I sent them an email prior to this, and the any thoughts is going to look like this. So I could do something like that, or if I want to get fancy, I could throw a little GIF in here that looks like this. I could do something like that. That works pretty well too. I don't know if you guys have preferences around what you use for your video platform, but Drift Video is something you can use to make GIFs. BombBomb talked about this. Vidyard you could use. So you could do something like this and try it. So I've seen a couple of people, they're like, well, what if your emails maybe go to spam? Well, just try it and see if it works. If it doesn't work and the open rate's lower, don't use it. All right, so I want to get back to this piece here, and I want to pause for a second. Could you let me know in the chat, what's your biggest takeaway been so far? From what I shared just now, what's most actionable for you to start using immediately after this webinar? I'd love to hear from you in the chat. And then what I can do here is answer some of the Q&A a bit. Yeah, be in their face much more. So Connor Foley, you asked, how can we gauge which prospect we should be targeting and when we should be calling, timing? I would call the people that are opening up your emails. If I had to prioritize it, that's what I would focus on. Jacomi says, what if you're trying to get the person in a meeting for a very complicated, it's very difficult to explain. We'll get to that one here in a second. Yeah, Matt. Hey, what's up, Matt? Matt Gorsuch asks, sequences, also multi-thread. How do we effectively sequence multiple people in a target account? Don't put the same people on an email chain. I would sequence all of them separately. So treat them as individuals. Don't put multiple people on the same email chain, Matt. How many contacts should I put on this kind of cadence? Someone anonymously asked that. I don't know. That's really hard for me to answer because maybe you are doing enterprise and your average deal size is $500,000 plus. That might be 15 or 20 people on this sequence. If you're selling something that's like $500 a month, you might have hundreds of people in something like this, and maybe you don't call as much and it's really heavy on the email. So you got to find a sweet spot. The way that I would suggest going about this is think about how much time do I have to prospect each week and start looking at how long it takes to make these calls. And some sequences might be more call heavy or email heavy, depending on that. So that's what I would recommend there. Ian, I should have answered your question. Is there an ideal amount of days in between touches? Yeah, 48 hours. So you're going to run this pattern on the screen that you see right now. You're going to do that 3 weeks in a row. Okay. Yeah, Ario says, any thoughts? Is that the subject line or the body of the email? I'm pretty sure I answered that too. That's going to be in the body of the email. All right. I know you guys have a lot of questions here. I want to make sure that we have time to get to the cold calling part. We're not going to get a chance to really dig into what the third or fourth email looks like, because today I promised that I would give you a bunch of goods on cold calling. So I want to make sure to deliver on that. Okay. All right. So let's dig into the cold calling piece. So what I want to give you here is a framework that you can use to make that call to that target contact that you're trying to get a hold of. So think about that decision maker, that VP of whatever, that C-level, whoever it might be. What I'm going to run you through is the framework to get those people on the phone and what to say when you do that. Yeah, so Michael, no repeat the steps, but different content on the second and third. Yep, exactly. So the second and third week are going to be different content and different emails, obviously. So what you want to do here is we're going to break up the cold call into 3 pieces. All right, so let's zoom in here. The first part that we have is our intro. So that's the first 30 seconds. The middle part is your hook. The hook is the part where you want to engage the prospect and ask questions and really create the need for a meeting. And then we're going to talk about how to close the cold call. All right, so let's zoom in again and let's look at this intro. Here's where I could use some more help from you guys in the chat. So let's put ourselves in the seat of the prospect. The way I like to design a cold call talk track is not about what we want to accomplish. I want to think about what does the prospect, what do we need to give the prospect? What needs to happen for the prospect in order for them to want to continue talking to you? So that first 30 seconds. So Mark says a way out. Yep, it's like you're reading my mind, dude. So what we want to do here is I'd love your help in the chat. What do you think is going through the prospect's head when they decide that I'm going to pick up the phone from a number that I don't recognize? I want you guys to sit in the seat of the prospect for a second. What do you think your prospects are thinking when they decide to pick up their phone and answer it? Please don't be a salesperson, Jason says. Who is this, David says. Yeah, why are you bothering me? Yeah. Leon says, who the F is this? Zach says, lose my number. I hope this isn't a cold call, Reed says. This will probably be a waste of time. What are you selling me? Oh, no, not again. I told you I don't want your damn software, Mark says. Okay, so you guys are hilarious. So here's what we want to do. We want to address all of those things in our intro. And I'm a really big fan of keeping the intro very simple. It's not about having a magic cold call intro. Although on LinkedIn, you might see all this content around use the 27-second opener and all this other stuff. You don't need to be super fancy with this. The more straightforward and human you can be, the better. So this intro is going to comprise of 3 parts. So the very first thing that we want to do is remove the surprise. That's super easy. Hey, Sandra? Yeah, this is Jason with Blissful Prospecting. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. Name, company name. The only reason why you might not say the company name at the very, very beginning of the call is if you have really good brand recognition. And let's say you're Zoom. If I said, hey, I'm Jason with Zoom, people might be like, oh, I'm already using video conferencing software. So unless you get an objection when you share your company name, I would do name and company. Very beginning. Sean, doesn't matter. You could use your first name or you could use your first plus the last name. All right. Adrian, I don't like the did I call it a bad time, and I'll explain that here in a second. So I'm going to remove the surprise. The next thing that I'm going to do is use what's called a permission-based opener. I'm going to allow the prospect to opt in to the cold call. So think about that for a second. I'm going to give them a choice to opt in to the call and decide if they want to participate or not. And what you might be thinking is, well, Jason, if we give them an option, yes or no, aren't they going to say no? Well, they could. They could totally say no. But what we know in terms of psychology is that when people are given a choice over whether to participate and they feel like they have autonomy and a choice, they're actually more likely to say yes. All right. So 9 times out of 10, you should get a yes to your permission-based opener. So let's look at the permission-based opener. Here, let me actually add a page below this. So permission-based opener. All right. And I'm trying to be a little quick, so I appreciate you guys dealing with my sloppy handwriting here. All right. So the permission-based opener, the formula for it is empathy. Empathy plus, time plus permission. So the empathy is, I'm just going to call out what I think they're thinking. So it could be something as simple as this. This is the one I use 9 times out of 10. I get a yes. I rarely get someone say no to this. Hey, Sandra, Jason with Blissful Prospecting. Look, I know I probably caught you in the middle of something, but do you got 30 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling? And then you could let me know if you want to keep chatting. Exactly like that. The empathy is, I know I probably caught you in the middle of something, because that's what people are thinking. I'm busy. Time, that was the 30 seconds that I said, but it doesn't have to be 30 seconds. It could be a minute. Permission is, I'm going to allow them to opt in. So Peter, you brought up a very good question. Peter says, doesn't the permission-based question make you look weak, especially if you're calling peer-to-peer? I'm thinking status and credibility perspective. Well, you know what? Every peer that I interact with in my line, in my field, so your sales coaches, your trainers, your best-selling authors, they like to be able to opt into stuff. It actually rubs them the wrong way when I try to be really assumptive with them and push them into doing something and not give them a choice. So peer-to-peer, a way you respect someone's time, which any successful executive is going to be very particular with how they spend their time. Asking for permission, I'm not saying that you're begging, getting down on one knee and begging them for time, okay? We're not doing that, right? But just saying, hey, Mark, I know I probably caught you in the middle of something, but you got a minute for me to tell you why I'm calling, and then you could let me know if it's worth chatting about further or not. So if you want to do that, peer-to-peer, I'm talking to them as a peer. I'm not talking super fast. I'm not being super high-pitched and super excited. Matthias, I'm not going to write this down, but you're going to get the recording afterwards so that you can review it, okay? I would not suggest using this for emails someone asks. Yeah. So you can have a little bit of fun with your permission-based opener too. So let's say that I call someone on a Monday and they pick up in the morning, which I actually recommend calling people on Mondays and Fridays because most salespeople are taught not to call people on Mondays and Fridays. So they end up getting fewer calls. So Friday afternoons especially can be a really good time. So if I call someone on a Friday afternoon, I might say, hey, Sandra, Jason with Blissful Prospecting. I know it's Friday afternoon, and the last thing you probably wanted to do is take a cold call right now, but I promise I'll make it quick. You got a minute for me to tell you why I'm calling, and then you can let me know if you want to keep chatting? Or do you got a minute for me to tell you why I'm calling, and you can decide whether or not you want to get the weekend started early? If I call someone on a Monday morning, I might say, hey, I know it's Monday, and you're probably super slammed the rest of the day with meetings, so I'll make it short. You got 30 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling, and then you can let me know if you want to keep chatting. So I want to allow them to opt in. The way that I'm suggesting you do this is not the only way to cold call. All right. You don't have to use a permission-based opener, but you know what? This is something you could start implementing right away that when you get comfortable with it, you're going to get a pretty good lift. So with our intros, first 30 seconds, let's get them to opt in. Now, what do most salespeople do at this point? Elevator pitch. And if you guessed that the reason why I wrote that in red is because you're not supposed to do that, you guessed correctly. So we do not want to do an elevator pitch. So again, we're trying to be different from other people that cold call them. Oh, hey, Alex. Yeah, you could definitely say this is a cold call. Do you have 30 seconds? So you could definitely do something like that. Teas, it's not too long unless you make it long. So I believe that what I said maybe took 10 or 15 seconds to say. So I want to get them talking in that first 15 to 30 seconds. And I do not want to do an elevator pitch here. So what I don't want to say is, do you got 30 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling? And then you can let me know if you want to keep chatting. The prospect says yes. And then you go, yeah, my name's Jason. Again, I'm calling from Woodpecker. And we're a sales engagement tool that can help you automate emails. And we can help you make phone calls. And we can help you scale the... And it's just like, they're just like, they're totally just going to go over. They're going to roll their eyes. Just like, oh, this is just another sales pitch for a tool that I don't need. So we're not going to do an elevator pitch here. What we're going to do instead is what's called a priority drop. So priority drop is what your prospect is working on, what their goals might be. So what we need to do in order to have a really good talk track is we need to understand the priorities of the people that we're reaching out to. I'll give you an example of what this might sound like, okay? So I worked with a company that sells an automated welding solution. I won't mention their name, but they reach out to VPs of operations and VPs of manufacturing. And it's a software as a service, right? This platform, and then it's also hardware as a service. So it's basically an automated welding system that can replace the need for welders. All right. So if I'm talking to a VP of manufacturing, what we noticed is that their two main priorities fit into these buckets. Okay. So if we had VP of manufacturing, one of them was around labor, and the other one was around automation. So here's what I'm going to say. So, hey, Sandra, Jason with ABC Company. Do you got 30 seconds for me to tell you why I'm calling? You can let me know if you want to keep chatting. Yeah, sure, Jason. What's going on? How can I help you? Priority drop. I'm going to say, hey, typically when I talk to VPs of manufacturing, I hear that they're focused on one of two things. One is dealing with the labor market right now. It's taking months, sometimes years, to hire welders because of the labor shortage of talent. And they're trying to figure out ways to get people in faster with more talent. Two, the other thing that I'm hearing is they've tried automating some of the more complex parts of their manufacturing process. And for whatever reason, it's been unsuccessful or it's been way too complicated because they have to keep staff, keep people on staff to update the software. I'm really curious, are either of those two things something that you're running into right now? So I'm going to be super specific. So what I want you guys to think about as you're watching this is what are those main 2 or 3 priorities for your prospects? Zach, I'm not going to type it right now. There's going to be a recording that'll get sent out, you guys. So you just have to review it. It'll just save time so we can get to some of the other topics. So we know that a VP of manufacturing is focused on this labor shortage. And we know that they're focused on automation right now. So again, this priority drop right here is going to be, I get permission. They say, yeah, go ahead. What's up? How can I help you? Typically, when I talk to people like you, they're working on one of these 2 or 3 things. Number one, and I'm going to say the main thing, and I'm going to be really specific with that thing. So for this VP of manufacturing, it's labor shortage. Welders are really hard to hire right now. I noticed that you guys actually have 3 or 4 open positions, and people are just, what I hear constantly is it takes way too long to hire them, and the people that we bring in don't stick around for that long. So Aaron, these are not necessarily main pain points, although you could use pain points. Priorities are, what are we trying to accomplish? And then I can stack a problem alongside of that, right? So what I'm trying to accomplish, automation. I'm trying to automate what would normally be very hard to automate in our manufacturing process. And I'm running into this problem. So it's, what am I trying to accomplish and what's a problem maybe getting in the way of that? It's those 2 things stacked together, but it doesn't have to be a problem. So what I want you to think about is, what do you hear your prospects share with you in discovery calls? If you're an SDR or BDR, what are your AEs? What problems do they talk about that your product can help solve? So these priorities, what's really important is you're not going to come in and say, yeah, typically what I hear from people like you is they need an automation platform to send their emails out, and we're helping them with Woodpecker. We're not going to talk about our solution in the very beginning. We're going to save it for the end. So I'm going to do this priority drop, okay? Before I move on, let me know if you guys have any questions about this. This is a very key piece. A guy I work with, Ethan Parker, a couple months ago, we got his cold call conversion rate from about 1 out of every 14 people he'd talked to taking a meeting with him to 1 out of every 3. Making this shift, moving into priorities and starting with that versus doing an elevator pitch or just pitching problems. I want to talk high level. What are they trying to accomplish? Now, what this allows me to do on the phone is this allows me to filter the conversation so that in this hook, I can focus more in depth on problems and using a technique I call question stacking. So now I'm going to move into the problems. So let's use this one as an example again. So let's say this VP of manufacturing is like, you know what? We've had a heck of a time hiring welders right now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to now know that of those 2 priorities, hiring welders and getting people in place, that's the thing they're focused on more than the automation. And I'm going to ask questions around that. So the important part here is I'm going to ask questions that have some context in them. So if I can talk to what my clients are doing or what other people are doing and what they're having problems with, and then ask a question around that, that's a really good way to start a conversation. So I might say something like, oh, interesting. I'm actually hearing that, Sandra, from a lot of VPs of manufacturing right now. And one thing that they're trying to do is they've been working with recruiters. They've been posting ads online. They've been doing everything they can to get more welders hired. How have you guys been tackling this problem? Or one thing I can say is, yeah, another thing that I'm hearing too is that people are looking for ways to, bring some automation or robotics in to the equation so that they don't need to rely on as many welders. But I'm really curious, how are you guys trying to solve this problem right now? So I'm going to suggest some things that they might be doing or having challenges with. And then I'm going to ask a how or what oriented question. How and what oriented questions give me an open-ended answer versus a yes or no answer. The biggest thing that we want to do here is that we want to ask open-ended questions that get them talking. Have you guys ever been on an awkward first date before? It could be for a significant other, or it could be a friend date too. You know what's really awkward is when the conversation is just, you're asking questions and it's yes or no answers. It's really short and there's no momentum in the conversation. It's really awkward. This happens a lot on cold calls where you're asking questions, or maybe you're talking, the prospect doesn't seem very talkative. It's because you're not asking them very good questions. So we got to ask open-ended questions to create some momentum in the call. Now, once we've come up with 2 or 3 good questions around the problems, what connects the hook and the close is we're going to summarize. So I'm going to say, hey, James, so what I heard today is that you've tried automation before and you've been able to automate about 1/3 of the products that you guys are manufacturing right now. But for those other 2/3, they've just been really hard to automate because they kind of fit into that, high mix, low volume bucket of products. And the other thing that I'm hearing too is that you've had job ads open for about 2 or 3 months to hire welders. And for whatever reason, you just haven't been able to hire the people that you want. So I'm going to summarize what they said. So you don't have to worry about there being an awkward transition into the close. I'm just going to ask a few questions and I'm just going to restate back to the prospect what I heard them say, but in my own words. And what that's going to help me do as I move into the close is get agreement. Think about in your personal life when you've been having issues with something and then you share it with a friend, or you talk about how hard of a day you're having, and your friend just says, hey, sounds like you've had a pretty tough day, which is totally understandable. Your boss kind of sounds like a jerk. And you're like, yeah. You feel really understood, right? Like this person's restating back to you what they heard you say, and it makes you feel really good. So we're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to summarize. Here's what I heard. And then I'm just going to ask, so Aaron, did I miss anything? I'm just going to let them talk. Here's what I heard. Did I miss anything? I'm going to get agreement. And usually what they'll do is either add more context or they'll say, no, you nailed it. Yeah, definitely. And then from there, I am going to cut the call short. The power dynamic is very interesting. A couple people brought this up earlier. Oh, does that make me look like inferior to them? I want to be a peer. All of that stuff is really important. The relationship dynamic in sales that we tend to play too much into is that the dynamic between you and the prospect is one of you pursuing and the prospect being pursued. A way that we can break up that dynamic a little bit is allowing them to pursue you. Okay? So you called them, right? Pursuing. What we're going to do here is we are going to cut the call short and let them come to us. So this is a way you can even out that dynamic of you being the pursuer and them being the one that's pursued. So we're going to get agreement. I'm going to say, hey, Sandra, did I miss anything? Sandra says no. And then I'm going to cut the call short. I'm going to say, well, hey, how about this? What you shared is stuff that we might be able to help you out with. But how about this? I promised I'd be short at the beginning of this call. How about we unpack this at a time when I'm not calling you out of the blue? Do you have your calendar handy? I'm going to cut the call short. I'm going to be the one that leaves the conversation. A really good thing that you can do too is during this stage, if you ask really good questions and the prospect's super talkative, a couple minutes in, say, hey, Sandra, hey, apologies for interrupting you. I just want to be conscious of your time. I mentioned that I keep the call short at the beginning. What I heard you say was XYZ. Did I miss anything? No. How about we unpack this at a time when I'm not calling you in the middle of the blue, in the middle of your day here? Do you have your calendar handy? So you could even kind of politely cut the prospect off too. Hey, apologies for interrupting. I just want to be conscious of your time because I said I'd keep it short at the beginning. What I heard you say was XYZ. That's to summarize. Did I miss anything? How about we unpack this at a time when I'm not calling you in the middle of your day? And then what we're going to do is what I call a triple confirmation. This part's super important. So what we're going to do is we're going to confirm the invite on the call. I want you to send the email invite, the calendar invite on the call. This increases the show rate for a couple of reasons. One, it'll make sure that you didn't send the wrong email to the wrong person, right? The second thing is when people hit accept, it'll actually accept on their calendar so that no one else can book a meeting over that time. So I'm going to send the invite. I'm going to take the extra 15, 30 seconds to make sure that they accept the invite on the call. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to confirm the agenda. And I'm going to say, hey, what I heard you say was XYZ. We're going to make sure to address those things, plus a few other things that we might be able to help you out with. And then lastly, maybe you send an email confirmation if the meeting is booked for a week out, let's say. You could send an email confirmation a couple days before with a case study or whatever it might be. All right. So I want to go ahead and pause here. Could you let me know in the chat what was most actionable for you today in this cold calling section? So Dale, you're going to share the agenda in both. You're going to put it in the invite, you're going to put it in the confirmation email, and you're going to state the agenda again. But let me know in the chat, what's been most helpful for you? What can you immediately put into action after this call? I'm all about making this actionable, okay? So what can you immediately put into action? Yeah, priority drops, the directives, priority instead of pitch. Yeah, having a process. Yeah, Sean, definitely. Role-playing. Jeff Beal, yes, if we got rid of elevator pitches and prospecting, that would just be like, oh my God, thank you so much. If we could just get rid of the pitch, that would be great. I'm not saying that pitching is bad. Prospecting is not the time to do it, though. Yeah, summarize before you close, priority drop. Yeah, so I want to answer a few questions in the Q&A. So Giacomo, I'm probably not pronouncing your name correctly, my bad. You said, what if you're trying to get the person in a meeting for a very complicated tech product? It is very difficult to explain value without talking too much. You don't need to explain value. If you nail the priorities and you talk around the problems, you just talk about how the next meeting, you can talk about how you might be able to help them solve those problems. You don't even have to talk about the value prop or anything like that. So talk about what are people like you trying to accomplish, the priorities, what are some problems that get in the way? And if you get that part right, they're going to want to talk on the next meeting for you to be able to really unpack it and do your discovery, your demo, all that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't overcomplicate it. Yeah, a couple people asked that. Yeah, you could totally drop in a priority drop into your voicemails as well. Okay. All right. So we got about 10 minutes left here. What I want to do, if everyone's cool with it, is let's talk about the objection handling framework. So what I'd love to hear from you in the chat here, can you drop what is the most common objection you get, not when selling, but when doing outbound? Yeah, not interested. Zach says, a lot of not interested. I'm super busy. I'm running into a meeting. Okay. I think we'll have time to maybe deal with a few of these, maybe 2 or 3 of them. Yeah, don't have budget. Oh, hey, Rashmi. Yep. Okay, we already used something. So here's the thing with objections is the reason why I like to use the analogy of deflating the objection is that I notice people tend to be very confrontational when they handle objections. And instead of taking air out of the balloon, they actually create tension by adding air to the balloon, okay? And the reason for that is that when we focus on handling the objection and using a rebuttal, it puts us in this dynamic again of we are the pursuer and they are the one being pursued. We want to level the dynamics out a little bit and share that responsibility of being pursued with the prospect. The way that we do that is instead of getting the prospect to understand us, I actually want to start with understanding where the prospect is coming from first. So there's that old quote, I think, from Teddy Roosevelt. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So I want to start with them first, and then I'll get to my thing, okay? So what does this look like? So this offer piece at the end, I don't want to start with what I want first. I want to start with them. And the way that I do this is through a couple of things. I'm going to empathize. I'm going to validate. So I'm going to talk to what I think is on their mind first. I'm going to validate that. And then what that's going to help me hopefully do is disarm and better understand where the prospect is coming from. So let's look at these first two. So if someone says not interested, help me out here in the chat. What do you think the prospect is thinking? When they say not interested, what is the emotion behind that statement? What is the feeling behind that statement? What do you think is going on inside their head outside of the words not interested? Yep, don't have time. Yeah, so don't have time, busy, already have a solution. Yeah, not worth my time. Glenn says get lost, right? So I don't want to talk to you because you're a salesperson. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to make a simple statement that acknowledges all of those things. And what we could do really simply is I like using a statement that just starts with something like this. Sounds like. If anyone's read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, he didn't come up with this technique, but it's called labeling. He talks about it a lot, kind of popularized it in sales. Sounds like, looks like, feels like, seems like. So we're going to empathize with the person by talking to what we think might be on their mind. So if I cold call and I say, hey, do you got 30 seconds? And the person cuts me off at the beginning and says, not interested. I'm going to say, sounds like I caught you in the middle of something. And then I'm going to validate that. I'm going to let them know that it's totally okay if they don't want to talk right now. So I like using a phrase that starts with something like this. And you guys, again, this is not about using the perfect words here. Totally understandable. I'm going to say, hey, sounds like I caught you in the middle of something. And if that's the case, totally understandable if now's not a good time to chat. I'm not going to argue with them. So if someone says, oh, I'm busy right now, sounds like I caught you in the middle of something, which is totally understandable because I'm calling you in the middle of your day here, or I'm calling you unexpectedly, or I'm cold calling you out of the blue, whatever you want to say there. The specific words are not as important as going through this process. Yeah, so Jason, you said busy, but they picked up the phone. Exactly. But I'm not going to argue with them because I don't know if you guys have tried arguing with a prospect. That doesn't really work that well. So, yep. So I'm just going to agree with them. Sounds like I caught you in the middle of something, which is totally understandable since I'm calling you out of the blue here. And then to get into this offer piece, I like something that looks like this. So I like sharing a quick story. So again, I'll use the same example I used before with the automated welding solution. So if I call a VP of manufacturing like, oh, not interested, I say, hey, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something. Totally understandable since I'm calling you out of the blue in the middle of your day. And then I'll transition into this offer piece. Hey, this might be a long shot, but the reason I called you is that you guys look a lot like ABC Company, who was having trouble automating some of those high mix, low volume products in their manufacturing mix, like it looks like you guys have. Was I totally off base in reaching out, thinking this might apply to you? Or would it be a bad idea if I shared a little bit more about how we're helping them? So I'm going to share a quick customer story. This company was having this problem, and they're a lot like you. And I thought maybe you might be having that problem too, but I could be totally off. I'm going to give them the choice again. Now, so I'll repeat that again. Not interested. No, don't have time. Hey, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something. If that's the case, totally understandable since I'm calling you out of the blue here. But hey, I know this might be a long shot, but you looked a lot like ABC Company, who was having some challenges automating some of those, high mix, low volume products in their manufacturing mix. And one of the things that we were able to help them with is automating some of those things so they didn't have to rely so much on hiring more welders. Was I totally off in thinking that might be something you'd be interested in hearing more about? Or would it be a bad idea if I shared more? This or that? You looked a lot like this customer who was having this problem, and we helped them do this. Would it hurt to share it more, or was I off and thinking that this might apply to you? Yeah, so you guys can listen back to the recording for that. There's a lot of things that I did there, but that's the approach that I like to use here. This framework you can apply to any kind of objection. So if someone says, I'm not the right person, or if someone says, here, let me look, because another one that you're going to get a lot is we're taken care of. Yeah, so if someone's like, hey, we already have a solution for this, sounds like you're taken care of. The validate piece, which is totally understandable. I like to use a little bit of flattery. So, which is totally understandable. Looks like you've been in the position for about 10 years now. So I imagine you put a lot of effort into picking out the solution. But you looked a lot like this company who was also doing that ran into these problems. And I'm just kind of curious, would it hurt to share more about how we're helping them? Or is my timing totally off here? Now, I continue to the offer, Ian. Yep. So Ian asked, are you pausing after this validate piece? Nope, I'm not going to pause, but I'm not in a rush to talk either. All right. We have to take off here in a couple minutes. Before Sandra makes a couple kind of closing announcements, you guys, the participation has been great. This time flew by. I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Can you share with me what was your biggest takeaway from today? What was the biggest thing that you personally took away from today that you can start applying in your outbound approach? Let me know in the chat. And Sandra, I know you had some kind of closing thoughts here. Anything that you wanted to say?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to answer one of the questions because I forgot to say it at the beginning. The webinar, as Jason said already, is being recorded, and I will be sending it to you by the end of the week via email, so you'll all get it. Yeah, and thank you so much for coming, all of you. And Jason, thank you for taking the time to come and share your knowledge with us. It's a pity we have to kind of break off right now, but it's been great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and everyone else. I just seeing all the comments in the chat. This is super awesome. So we'll be sending an email out with the replay, and if you want to connect with me, let me just drop my LinkedIn profile in here as well, and you guys will be able to connect with me on LinkedIn for more content. And here, let me find that real quick and drop it in. I post content every day on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with you guys if we're not already connected. There we go. Just dropped it into the chat. So feel free to send me a connect request on LinkedIn and follow me for content, and we'll send an email out to you guys with a little more info on this recording and how we might be able to help you further. Cool. Thank you for having me, everyone. We'll see you later. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you. Have a great day or night ahead, depending on where you are. Yeah. Bye-bye.